My wedding was planned, my fiancé was perfect, and our life was a dream. Then I found a spreadsheet on his iPad titled The Roster, and my name was number 23. The wedding invitations were sitting on our coffee table, a pristine stack of cream-colored cardstock tied with a delicate sage green ribbon. 150 envelopes, each one representing a future we were supposed to build together. My fiancé, Liam, had insisted on the expensive paper, the kind with a subtle texture that felt like old money under your fingertips. "Only the best for us," he'd said, kissing the top of my head. For 5 years, he had been my only the best. The man who brought me coffee in bed every morning, who knew my takeout order by heart, who held my hand just a little tighter when we walked past jewelry stores, even after he'd already given me the perfect ring. His parents, Helen and David, adored me. They'd already started calling me their daughter. Helen and I had a standing lunch date the first Saturday of every month. She'd send me photos of baby Liam, chubby and smiling, with captions like, "I knew he was waiting for someone special." David, a man of few words, would give me these warm, approving nods, and once told Liam in front of me, "Son, you finally did something right." They were the in-laws every girl dreamed of, and I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. We were the perfect couple, with the perfect families, planning the perfect wedding. It was all a beautiful, intricate, and utterly convincing lie. The whole perfect world shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. It was so mundane, so ridiculously simple. Liam had left his iPad on the kitchen counter, synced to his phone and laptop. I was using it to look up caterers, comparing menu options for coconut shrimp versus bacon-wrapped scallops. An iMessage notification popped up at the top of the screen. It was from a group chat named The League. I recognized the names. Liam's college buddies, the ones who would be his groomsmen. The message was from Mark, his best man. It read, "You guys will not believe the details for the Vegas send-off. No 24 is not going to know what hit her." No. 24? I frowned. It was probably just some stupid inside joke, but a cold, slithering feeling started to coil in my stomach. Curiosity, that deadly, irreversible sin, took over. I opened the message thread. I told myself I was just being silly, that I'd have a little laugh and then go back to the scallops. But I didn't laugh. I scrolled, and I scrolled, and my heart methodically broke with each swipe of my finger. It was a cesspool. Years of it. They talked about women like they were collectible items, swapping stories, sharing pictures, ranking them. It was vile, but it was their private chat, I tried to tell myself. Boys being boys, as pathetic as that excuse was. But then I started seeing my own name, or rather, my nickname, the Glacier. Sometimes, the final boss. They talked about our life together as if it were a game Liam was playing. "The Glacier is fully domesticated," one message read. "He's almost at the finish line." Liam's replies were the worst, filled with laughing emojis and smug assurances. He played along, bragging about how he had me completely fooled. But the real horror, the thing that made the air leave my lungs in a silent scream, wasn't in the chat. It was a link Liam had sent a few months back, a link to a Google sheet. The spreadsheet was titled The Roster. My blood turned to ice. It was a list. A meticulously organized, horrifying list. There were columns for name, date of conquest, a rating system out of 10 for various physical attributes and performance metrics, and a final column simply titled Notes. There were 23 entries above mine, 23 women he had been with, cataloged and rated like pieces of meat. And then, there I was. Entry number 23. My name, Sarah Jensen. The date was from our first year together. He'd started this disgusting ledger while we were already a couple. In the notes column next to my name, he had written, "Wife material, good for public image, the end game. Settle down, secure the promotion, then keep the game going on the side. The league never retires." The world went silent. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic, it all faded away. There was only the stark white of the screen and the black letters that had just ripped my life to shreds. I wasn't his partner, his love, his future wife. I was a strategic move. I was number 23, the final boss in his sick, twisted game. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The urge to smash the iPad, to scream, to collapse into a sobbing heap on the floor was overwhelming. But then something else washed over me. A terrifying, profound calm. The kind of clarity you get right after a car crash when you're assessing the damage. The love didn't just die, it evaporated, leaving behind something cold, hard, and sharp. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I began to work. With shaking but steady hands, I started taking screenshots. Everything. The glacier comments. The Vegas plans that detailed things that made my stomach churn. And of course, the roster. I screenshotted the entire list, making sure my name and his disgusting notes were perfectly framed. I airdropped every single image to my phone and laptop, saved them to a new folder on a cloud drive, and then backed them up again. I moved through the apartment like a ghost, packing a bag with my essentials, my important documents, and the few sentimental items that he hadn't tainted. My final act was to create a new group chat on my phone. I titled it Liam's Future. I added 2 people, Helen and David, his mother and his father. I typed out a single simple message, but I didn't press send. Not yet. I just left it there, sitting in the text box, a digital bomb waiting to detonate his perfect life. I sat on the couch, the stack of pristine wedding invitations staring back at me from the coffee table, a monument to a future that would never happen. I waited. An hour later, I heard his keys in the door. He walked in, whistling a cheerful tune, holding a bouquet of my favorite flowers, stargazer lilies. The scent of them, once my favorite, now smelled like a funeral. "Hey, honey, I'm home," he called out, his voice full of the casual love I now knew was a performance. He walked into the living room and his smile was blinding. For my beautiful bride-to-be. He stopped when he saw my face. The cheerfulness drained from his expression, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then concern. "Sarah? What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't say a word. I just slowly, deliberately, picked up the iPad from the cushion next to me and turned the screen to face him. On it was a crystal clear screenshot of the roster with my name, number 23, highlighted in yellow. The blood drained from his face. His eyes widened in pure, unadulterated panic. The lily slipped from his hand and fell to the floor in a scattered, silent heap. He opened his mouth, a pathetic, stammering sound coming out before he finally formed the words, the most predictable, useless words in the English language. "I can explain," he started, his voice a desperate whisper. I let out a soft, humorless laugh that sounded alien even to my own ears. It was a dry, rattling sound from a place inside me that had turned to dust. "Explain?" I echoed, my voice chillingly calm. "Explain what, Liam? Explain the rating system? Or should we start with the notes?" "Good for public image. Was that before or after you decided I was the end game?" I stood up, my movements slow and measured, as if I were a queen on a chessboard and he was a pawn that had just realized the game was over. He flinched at my words, a visible tremor running through his body. He took a step towards me, his hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. "Sarah, baby, please. It's not what it looks like. It was a joke, a stupid, disgusting joke from years ago. I was an idiot. I was trying to act tough for my friends. It doesn't mean anything." "Years ago?" I raised an eyebrow, my expression unmoving. "You updated Mark on your Vegas send-off plans for number 24 this afternoon. Am I number 24 now, Liam? Have I been upgraded from a number to another number?" Every word was a perfectly sharpened icicle, and I enjoyed the way each one seemed to pierce his pathetic defense. "No, of course not. That was Mark being an idiot," he stammered, his eyes wide and frantic, darting from my face to the iPad still glowing with his sins. "You know how he is. You have to believe me, Sarah. I love you. That list. It's just words on a screen. It doesn't change what we have. What we have. The phrase hung in the air between us, so absurd it was almost comical. He was trying to sell me a fantasy that he himself had just proven was a lie. He tried to take another step, to close the gap, to use the physical intimacy we'd shared for 5 years as a weapon to disarm me. I held up a single hand, and he froze. It was amazing how quickly the power dynamic had shifted. He was no longer the confident man who had the world, and me, wrapped around his finger. He was a scared little boy caught with his hand in a cookie jar made of human souls. "Don't," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare touch me, and don't insult my intelligence by pretending what we had was real for you." I picked up my phone from the coffee table, my thumb hovering over the group chat I had created. "You seem to have a lot of explanations, a lot of excuses, but I'm not the one you need to convince." I looked him dead in the eye, a cold, empty void where my love for him used to be. "Save it for your parents." His face, already pale, turned a ghostly white. My parents? What are you talking about? Sarah, don't. Don't do this. We can fix this, I swear. He was pleading now, the facade of the smooth operator completely shattered. "I'll delete it. I'll delete everything. I'll leave the group chat. I'll do whatever you want." "It's a little late for that," I said softly, and with a single, deliberate tap, I hit send. I sent everything. The League group chat screenshots, the disgusting comments about the glacier, the vile plans for his bachelor party, and of course the pièce de résistance, the full, unredacted roster, with my name sitting at number 23. All of it delivered in a neat digital package to the 2 people in the world whose opinion he valued more than anything. He stared at my phone, then at me, comprehension dawning in his eyes like a slow-motion horror film. "What did you do?" he whispered, his voice trembling. I didn't answer. I just held his gaze. I wanted to watch him. I wanted to see the moment the architect of this nightmare realized the whole building was coming down on top of him. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by his ragged breathing. 1 second passed, then 2, then 5. It felt like an eternity. I could see the frantic calculations in his eyes, the desperate search for an escape route that didn't exist. He had trapped himself. And then it came. A loud, cheerful buzz vibrated on the kitchen counter where he'd left his phone. The screen lit up the darkening room. Liam's head snapped toward the sound as if he'd been shot. We both stared at the phone. The glowing screen was perfectly visible from where we stood. It was an incoming call. The name on the screen was simple, just one word that sealed his fate completely. It read, "Mom." The buzzing was relentless, a shrill, angry hornet in the suffocating silence of our apartment. Liam was paralyzed, his entire body locked in a rictus of terror. He looked at the phone, then at me, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air. The phone was a bomb, and the caller ID was the ticking clock. He knew it. I knew it, and I was going to make him answer it. "Well?" I said, my voice cutting through his panic. "Aren't you going to get that? It's your mother. I'm sure she's just calling to chat about flower arrangements." My sarcasm was a physical blow. He flinched, then scrambled for the phone, nearly knocking over a vase in his haste. He fumbled with the device, his thumb hovering over the green accept icon. He looked at me one last time, his eyes pleading, begging me for a lifeline I had no intention of throwing. He was looking for the woman he was supposed to marry, the soft-hearted Sarah who would forgive him, who would help him clean up this mess. But she was gone. In her place was a woman made of ice and fury. I just gave him a small, tight smile and a little nod, a gesture of encouragement that was anything but. He took a shaky breath and answered the call, pressing the phone to his ear with a hand that trembled. "Mom," he said, his voice a weak croak. "Hey." I couldn't hear Helen's side of the conversation, but I didn't need to. I could see it all on Liam's face. The blood drained from his cheeks, leaving his skin a sickly gray color. His eyes widened, his posture collapsing in on itself as if he'd been punched in the gut. He leaned against the counter for support, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge. "Mom, wait. It's not... You don't understand," he stammered, his voice cracking. He was trying to build a dam of lies against a tidal wave of truth. I watched, impassive, as the wave crashed over him. His excuses became more frantic, his denials more desperate. "It was a joke. It's not real. Sarah's right here. We're fine." He gestured wildly at me, as if my mere presence could negate the mountain of digital evidence his mother was currently staring at. I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe, making it clear I wasn't going anywhere. I wanted a front row seat. This was my show, my premiere. He had written the script with his years of deception. I was just the director making sure the final scene played out. "No, Mom, please, just let me talk to Dad," he begged. A pause. The muscles in his jaw worked furiously. "He won't? Mom, please, just listen to me. I can explain everything." There was that phrase again, his pathetic go-to line. It seemed to be having the same effect on his mother as it had on me. He listened for another long, torturous minute, his face a mask of crumbling despair. I could imagine Helen's voice, usually so warm and full of affection for me, now likely dripping with a cold disappointment that would be worse than any screaming rage. She was a woman of immense pride and integrity. To her, family wasn't just blood, it was character, and she had just discovered her son had none. Finally, he whispered, I know. I'm so sorry." The call ended. He didn't hang up. It sounded like she did. He slowly lowered the phone, his arm dropping to his side as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. He stared at the blank screen, then at the scattered lilies on the floor, emblems of a life that was now as dead as they were. She wants me to come over," he said, his voice hollow. "With Dad. They want to talk." "I'm sure they do," I said evenly. I walked past him and picked up the suitcase I'd packed earlier. It was waiting patiently by the door. His head snapped up. Reality finally seemed to crash down on him. This wasn't just about placating his parents. This was about me. "Wait, where are you going?" "Sarah, you can't leave. We have to fix this." "There is no we, Liam," I said, my hand on the doorknob. "There's just you and the mess you made. You go talk to your parents. Explain it to them. Use all the excuses you were going to use on me. See how well they work." "But the wedding," he cried out, his voice raw with desperation. "The venue, the deposits, our life. You can't just throw away 5 years." I turned to face him fully, my expression one of profound pity mixed with contempt. 5 years? You threw that away every time you added a name to that list. You threw it away every time you laughed with your friends about your final boss. The wedding is the least of your problems right now. I opened the door. The hallway light spilled into our dark, suffocating apartment. It felt like I was stepping out of a tomb. "Sarah, please," he begged, taking a step towards me. "Don't do this. I love you." I paused in the doorway, my back to him. I almost laughed. Love. He was still trying to use that word, as if it had any meaning left. I turned my head slightly, looking at him over my shoulder one last time. He looked pathetic, a shell of the man I thought I knew, standing amidst the ruins of the life he'd torched with his own 2 hands. "I know," I said, and my voice was devoid of all emotion. "You're number 23. You were supposed to love me. That was the whole point of the game, right?" Without waiting for an answer, I stepped out and closed the door behind me, the soft click of the latch sounding like a final, definitive gunshot. I didn't look back. I walked down the hall, my suitcase wheels rattling against the floor, each rotation taking me further away from the lie. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a frantic text from Liam, but it wasn't from him. It was a new text message, from a number I didn't recognize. The message was short, just a single chilling sentence. It read, "You think this is over? You have no idea what you've just done." I froze in the middle of the hallway, the blood in my veins turning to slush. The cheerful, sterile lighting of the apartment corridor suddenly felt menacing. I read the message again, and then a third time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less threatening. "You think this is over? You have no idea what you've just done." It was anonymous, a ghost reaching out from the digital ether, but I knew with a bone-deep certainty who had sent it. It had to be one of the League, Mark probably, his best man, the one who seemed to be the ringleader of their vile little club. For a moment, pure, unadulterated fear tried to claw its way up my throat. I was alone. I had just detonated my life, and in the process, I had made enemies of a group of men who saw women as objects and games as reality. They were wealthy, connected, and utterly devoid of the morals I had once naively believed everyone possessed. Liam was the one I knew, the one I had loved. The others were faceless avatars in a group chat, and that made them infinitely more terrifying. But then, the fear receded, replaced by that same cold, hard fury that had been my shield for the past few hours. They wanted to scare me. They wanted me to feel like I had made a mistake? Fine, let them try. I took a screenshot of the anonymous text, my fingers moving with practiced efficiency now. I saved it to the same cloud folder as all the other evidence, my own little league of receipts. Then I blocked the number and kept walking. I didn't run. I walked, my posture straight, my head held high, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cower. My first stop was my sister's apartment across town. I called her from the car, my voice finally cracking as I told her the bare-bones version. Liam wasn't who I thought he was. I left him. Can I stay with you? She didn't ask questions, just said, "Of course, I'm putting the kettle on." And that was all I needed. When I arrived, she took one look at my face, hugged me tightly, and let me cry. The tears I had held back finally came. A hot, cleansing flood of grief, not for the man Liam was, but for the man I had believed him to be. I had been mourning a ghost. Over the next 2 days, I went into tactical mode. My sister, bless her heart, acted as my shield, fielding calls from a frantic Liam, and even a few hesitant ones from his devastated mother. I didn't want to talk to any of them. I was done with their world. My focus was on disentanglement. I called the wedding planner and canceled everything. The woman was shocked but professional. "We can try to recoup some of the deposits," she offered sympathetically. "Don't bother," I told her. "Send all the final invoices to Liam. It was his party after all." I did the same with the caterer, the florist, the photographer. Every email was a snip of a thread, cutting myself free. Liam, predictably, didn't give up. He bombarded my phone with calls from blocked numbers and sent a barrage of increasingly desperate texts. "Sarah, please, we need to talk. My parents are destroying me. My dad won't even look at me. You've ruined my life." That last one almost made me laugh. I ruined his life? The audacity was breathtaking. He then switched tactics, sending long, rambling apologies, paragraphs of flowery nonsense about how I was his world, his everything, how he'd made a stupid mistake and would spend the rest of his life making it up to me. It was like reading a script from a bad romantic comedy. Every word was hollow, every sentiment a lie. I didn't reply to a single one. On the third day, a thick manila envelope arrived at my sister's apartment, forwarded from my old address. It was from Liam's father, David. I was surprised. I had expected him to side with his son, to try and smooth things over. But David was a man of quiet, unshakable principles. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside, there wasn't a letter. There was just a check. It was for a staggering amount of money. In the memo line, he had written 2 words, "For everything." It was the full amount of all the non-refundable wedding deposits, plus a significant sum on top of that. It wasn't a bribe. It wasn't an apology on Liam's behalf. It was restitution. It was David, in his own silent way, acknowledging the damage and trying to make it right. It was the only gesture from that family that felt genuine. I felt a pang of sadness for Helen and David. They were good people caught in the fallout of their son's moral bankruptcy. But my sympathy didn't extend to Liam. That same afternoon, I got an email from the HR department of the prestigious law firm where Liam and I both worked. We'd met there 5 years ago. It was a formal request for a meeting to discuss a sensitive workplace matter. I knew exactly what it was. Liam worked in the corporate division, gunning for a junior partnership. He was the golden boy. His good-for-public image wife-to-be, also a well-respected lawyer at the firm, was part of his strategic plan. A stable home life looked good to the old-school partners. I had no intention of making a scene at work, of dragging his personal failings into our professional lives. My plan was to resign quietly and find a new firm, to cut this final tie and move on. But then my phone buzzed again. It was another text from an unknown number. This one was different. This one had an attachment. It was a picture. A candid photo of me sitting in a coffee shop near my sister's apartment just that morning, my head in my hands. I looked exhausted and miserable. My heart stopped. They were watching me. The message underneath was simple. You should have stayed quiet, now it's our turn to play. The coffee shop photo was a declaration of war. My blood ran cold, but the fear was quickly consumed by a white-hot, diamond-hard rage. They thought they could intimidate me? Bully me back into a corner? They had mistaken my grief for weakness. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Liam's game was over, but mine was just beginning. I looked at the HR meeting request again. My plan to resign quietly evaporated. There would be no quiet exit. There would be a reckoning. I spent the next 24 hours preparing, not as a victim, but as the lawyer I was. I compiled everything into a neat, chronological file. The screenshots of the roster, the vile group chat, the details of their planned Vegas send-off, which, upon closer reading, involved activities that were not just immoral but illegal. I added the 2 anonymous threatening texts, including the picture of me. I documented the IP addresses they came from, a simple trace for someone with the right software. Unsurprisingly, one pinged back to a device owned by Mark, Liam's best man. The other came from another groomsman. This wasn't just Liam's personal failing anymore. This was a conspiracy of harassment originating from senior employees at my own firm. Because, of course, the League wasn't just Liam's college buddies. They were his colleagues. All of them worked at the firm. The next day, I walked into the HR meeting, not with my resignation letter, but with my lawyer. My sister had a friend, a bulldog of a woman named Anna, who specialized in workplace harassment and hostile environment claims. I walked into the conference room where the head of HR, Martha, and one of the firm's senior partners, Mr. Abernathy, were waiting. Liam was not present. They clearly intended this to be a gentle, let's handle this internally kind of chat. Sarah, thank you for coming in, Martha began, her tone oozing with synthetic sympathy. We were so sorry to hear about you and Liam. We wanted to discuss a smooth transition, perhaps a generous severance package to help you start fresh somewhere new. It was exactly what I expected. They weren't protecting me. They were protecting the firm and their rising star, Liam. They wanted to buy my silence and push me out the door. I let the silence hang for a moment before placing my file on the polished mahogany table. I pushed it towards them. I'm not here to discuss my resignation, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the tabletop. I'm here to discuss the systemic culture of misogyny and harassment that this firm has allowed to fester among its senior male employees. I believe you'll find the contents of that file illuminating. Anna took her cue. My client has been subjected to a coordinated campaign of emotional abuse and, as of yesterday, intimidation and stalking by several employees of this firm, including Liam Cartwright, Mark Renshaw, and others, she stated, her voice booming in the quiet room. This isn't a breakup. It's a massive legal liability for you." Martha's plastic smile melted. Mr. Abernathy, a man who looked like he hadn't been surprised by anything since the Nixon administration, slowly opened the file. I watched his eyes scan the first page, the screenshot of the roster. His expression didn't change, but a small muscle in his jaw began to twitch. He flipped the page, then another. When he got to the printouts of the anonymous threats, his face finally darkened. He closed the file with a quiet thud. The negotiation, if you could call it that, was short. Their attempt to manage the situation crumbled in the face of my evidence. They weren't just looking at one disgruntled ex-fiancé. They were looking at a potential lawsuit that would drag the firm's pristine reputation through the mud, expose multiple senior associates, and scare away female clients and talent for years to come. I didn't ask for money. I had David's check, which I had decided to donate to a charity for battered women. No, I wanted something more. I wanted accountability. I laid out my terms. Liam and his league were to be fired immediately, for cause, citing violations of the company's code of conduct and harassment policies. There would be no golden parachutes, no quiet resignations. They would be terminated, and their records would reflect why. Secondly, the firm would implement a mandatory company-wide harassment and sensitivity training program administered by an outside agency of my choosing. Finally, they would make a substantial public donation to the same charity I was supporting. They agreed to everything. The aftermath was swift and brutal. By the end of the day, Liam, Mark, and 2 other members of the League were called into Mr. Abernathy's office and summarily fired. The news spread through the firm like wildfire. The story, in its vaguest sense, was leaked that a ring of male employees had been fired for inappropriate conduct. The specifics, thankfully, remained private, but the message was clear. A week later, I received one final package. It was a small, unassuming box with no return address. Inside was the beautiful engagement ring Liam had given me. There was a simple handwritten note with it. It wasn't from Liam. The handwriting was Helen's. It said, "I am so sorry for all of it. He is no longer the son we raised. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. You were the best thing that ever happened to him, and he was too foolish to see it." I looked at the ring, the symbol of a future that had been a lie. It wasn't tainted, not really. The diamond was just a rock formed under pressure. It had survived, and so had I. I sold the ring, added the money to the donation, and finally, truly, closed the door on that chapter of my life. I did resign from the firm, but on my own terms, after I was sure they had followed through on every one of their promises. I left with my head held high, my integrity intact, and a folder full of screenshots that had served not as tools of revenge, but as instruments of justice. They had wanted to play a game. They just never realized I was the one who was going to win.